Good morning and welcome to this live Financial Mail Red Zone online event. I'm Janine Rainier, the General Manager at Tilt, and in today's online event, we will be talking about the consideration of cancel culture when developing marketing and brand strategies. Cancel culture is the popular practice of withdrawing support from public figures and companies after they have done or said something considered objectionable or offensive. Now in 2022, how do marketing professionals develop communications which are proof against this? We have a great panel lineup today who will assist us in what this sense checking entails. We have Fahim Chaudhry, Partner and Managing Director from M&C Saatchi Abel, Ashley Burton, Digital Associate at Consulum, Pumi Mashiko, Founding Partner at Ignitive, and Kagiso Tsepe, Executive Creative Director from Grill Worldwide. They will be weighing in on this matter. And if you have any questions, please do drop them on the live chat as we go, and we will ask your questions as we go along. So to kick us off, Fahim, I'm going to come to you first. What do you believe brought on cancel culture initially? And do you believe that it has always been prevalent?
Cool. Well, morning, everyone, and hi to everyone who's checking in. I suppose the first thing is to just unpack the introduction that you gave. Essentially what you're talking to is an old idea with the new title. Have people always boycotted ideas, companies, people that they sort of have a values issue with? Yes, they have. Has that always been as prevalent and at the scale to which it is now? I think that's the sort of core of the question, and what has enabled it to sort of ramp up. And I suppose social and the ability for the people, we the people, collective, to engage directly with individuals, with brands, with companies, with governments, even with cities and councillors, has been something we've never been able to do before. So is it more obvious to us? Yes. Has it always been prevalent? Maybe not in its title of cancel culture, but in people holding companies and individuals accountable. I don't think that's a new idea. Whether it's happening effectively previously, that's worth the discussion. But I think the idea of boycotting and holding truth to power is as old as, Socrates.
Great. So, cancel culture is it's a term that a lot of people are using at the moment. Ashley, I'm going to cross to you. Do you think that this is simply just another fad, or a mere phase that could have been predetermined, that could have a predetermined expiration date, and that's not too far down the line? Or do you think that cancel culture is something that is here to stay and something that needs to be considered in marketing strategies going forward?
I think, as Fahim pointed out, it's not a new concept, so I definitely don't think that it's going anywhere. I think the idea of public shaming is centuries old, and it's what holds us accountable to what society deems acceptable. I think what we're seeing now is a shift. So we no longer kind of back consumers who are going, oh, cancel this restaurant because I couldn't get a booking. We're a little bit wiser than that. And I think the shift that we're seeing is looking at what makes us feel vindicated as the people, what people, those that we cancel, what they can do to redeem themselves, if anything, and where kind of the blurred line between calling people out versus online bullying. I think that is the kind of shift in the conversation that we're starting to have.
Great. Pumi, since Ashley just highlighted that cancel culture is here to stay, how would you advise that a marketer navigates through this cancel culture successfully? Very hard question, but we know you're ready for it.
Not at all, actually. I think, as they've both pointed out, that this is not new. So consumer behavior is what we as marketers are supposed to be forecasting. That's what strategy does, right? Is it says, who's my consumer, who uses my product or services, and what do they like, what do they dislike? I think one of the things that we're seeing is marketers who've stopped being brave. And marketing as a whole has stopped being a seduction. It stopped being fun and magical. And we are very much kind of, as marketers, we've lost our power in that we are hoping that we can just ride the wave of what consumers are doing. But actually, that's not what we do. What we do as marketers is we set the tone for the consumer. And the strategy becomes even more important at this stage, is you've got to make sure that, and again, we now talk about influencer marketing as if it's something new, but actually brands have always used some kind of spokesperson at times. They've always been kind of branded considerations, the way that we use spokespeople for a brand or celebrities at some point, and in the strategy, you have to make sure that the people that you align with your brand are actually aligned with your brand values. And that kind of diminishes the opportunity of finding yourself in the midst of a cancel culture storm. But marketers have to be brave. Marketers have to be brave. And we have to remember that what we do is we seduce the audience. What we do is we entice the audience. We excite the audience. And then it's difficult for them to cancel you if you are giving them entertainment as much as you are getting them to buy into your product or services.
Ashley, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I wanted to just add the fact that brands are meeting consumers' expectations. We are, as consumers, they are more informed, they're more empowered. And like Pumi is saying, if you are a purpose-driven brand, you're going to fare well. I think prior to this, brands were a little bit scared to take a stance on a political issue or a social issue, and that cannot be the case anymore. But I also want to share the importance of not faking it. Consumers, like we said, are much wiser. So you can't just pretend to back a cause or overstate your contribution to something, because that will end up in you being cancelled.
Fahim, I think you've got something to add to that.
I was just going to say, we've dived sort of quite deep into the vibes here, and I think something that I always think about is on these topics, if we zoom out a little bit, can we understand these sort of phenomena a little bit better? And I'm reminded of this brilliant book called The Fourth Turning. I don't know who's read it. It's by two authors, William Strauss and Neil Howe. And what they did was they analyzed 500 years of history. And what they showed is every 20 years, the same predictable cycles repeat themselves over 500 years, despite the world changing, technology, air travel, all these wonderful things that have changed. But there's sort of four predictable sort of cycles. And the first 20 years is the idea of a high. It's like when we feel optimistic, 2010, good vibes, everything is feeling good. Then you go, and this is a global thing, then you go to a period of sort of awakening where people start to challenge the established order. Then you go into a period of sort of, I think it's called unraveling, where, individualism starts to triumph over, establishment. And I feel like that's sort of the cycle we're in now. And given the modern world, have things like social media that allow us to do those things in new ways, such as cancel culture. And after that comes some sort of accountability and responsibility, and the world moves forward on a particular issue. So I think you can go quite deep on cancel culture. If you just step back, you can go, this is just the way we're tackling a period of unraveling right now, is a way to look at it.
So, Kagiso, cancel culture is definitely something that is here to stay, from what we've heard from the panelists. Do you think that it is gaining momentum, or do you think it is going to slowly fall to the wayside, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, we are already quite deep into this conversation. I think as everyone is saying, it's kind of repeating itself. It has always been there, but the scale was much smaller than what we see right now, with everything that's kind of have changed. And how there's been a share of voice in terms of, power shifting from an exclusive point of view where only brands and big people were able to kind of have a voice, where now people are also talking.
I think he's frozen a bit. So, Pumi, I'm going to hand
awareness of issues, more education, with more access about what's happening. So I think it's here to stay, and it'll always kind of evolve into different forms.
Pumi, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I think as Fahim and also Kagiso was talking about, the fact that this is as the world turns. And that's precisely why I'm saying for marketers, this is where the first principles are going to save you. You've got to do the right things in terms of how you put your strategy together. And that's what will save you. Because as a marketer, your job is steering your brand through choppy waters. And these are the choppy waters. Consumers are incredibly active, and they have got, and what social media has done is it's democratized the voice of the people. And also, unfortunately, it's put a megaphone in front of very few people, and so they can distort what the message is. It can be 5 people who have the loudest share of voice simply because they have got the largest number of people who follow them. Right? So that's why you've got to get the first principles right. It's the hygiene factors that as marketers we have to stand to. Strategy then again becomes your guiding light, and being aware of the fact that strategy is not just a document you write up for your brand at the beginning of a cycle and then you put it in your drawer, but actually that it's an alive document, right? It's got to be responsive and reactive, and you always have to have your finger on the pulse so that you know where to go to next and how to dance with the audience, because you have the opportunity to engage them.
So the world is a lot more connected now. I mean, anyone can connect with the brands. They can, chat on social media. There's a lot more things. And I think COVID-19 accelerated all of that. Everyone went online. People who weren't necessarily having conversations are now having conversations online. So this whole term and thing of cancel culture is very important for marketers to take into consideration when they are planning their strategies, when they have campaigns that are going live. Fahim, do you think that it is time for these brands also to take more accountability and responsibility when, running their campaigns, and should they consider this as a key milestone when putting that plan and that campaign together?
Yeah, I think, what cuts to the heart of this is, company behavior and company values, can't hide anywhere anymore. And sort of bad actions and bad choice of words have consequences. So I think for me at least, it's a little bit less about what are we going to do about cancel culture, because that gets you into a panic mode of fixing, not solving. I think it's about taking a step back to go, are we clear as an organization, whatever organization that might be, about who we are, what we stand for, and how we authentically show up in the lives of the people that we're trying to engage with and speak to? The brands who certainly we work with that feel solid on those things are not worried about cancel culture because they've spent time, to Pumi's point, defining it and understanding where their place is and where it isn't. I think it's the companies who maybe haven't considered it too much who are feeling a bit shaky because it goes, I'm feeling exposed. So I think it's less about going, what are we going to do about cancel culture, and more about some reflection on, are we clear on who we are as an organization, the role that we play, and how we show up authentically. And then it's about unpacking, I think, the real questions that sit at the heart of companies. For example, if you cast your mind back to a year or two ago when there were some, strange ads that came out from, fashion retailers or shampoo brands, everyone will sort of remember who I'm talking about. And these ads go live, and the question goes, how did that leave this organization? That's now not just a marketing thing. That is a question of having the right people in the organization and having an inclusive enough culture for those people feeling like they can speak up. So this question is not about what do we do about cancel culture in our comms. This is a deeper reflection around, are we clear on who we are, and have we cultivated a space and a culture that allow the right voices to speak up. Cool.
Ashley, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to add, just on Fahim's point about some brands feeling like they're exposed or a little bit afraid. I've had so many clients who are so afraid of Twitter, and specifically, in their words, Black Twitter. And to me, it's almost like there's some kind of justice-seeking mob that's waiting, and it's going to rise up and just attack you for no reason. And to Fahim's point, there's always a reason. And I love the reframing of cancel culture as consequence culture and kind of holding yourselves accountable.
Okay, great. So Ashley, let's dig a little bit deeper. So what role does identity, race, politics, GBV, etc. play in cancel culture, and how does that affect marketers?
That's a tough one. That's a really, really intense question. I think if we look at South Africa, the question that's often asked is, would we need cancel culture if we had a justice culture? So to me, I'll always back cancel culture. I think it has helped to combat and address a lot of injustices, a lot of really problematic, hurtful, abusive behaviors. And I think, such a hard question to answer. So I think that's the role that it plays. I think for marketers, like we've been saying, it's about being aware. It's about knowing your brand. And then I would like to also just add, it brings up the importance of social listening. And if by chance you end up being cancelled, listen to it. I think it's a really great space for growth. I think listen, apologize, and mean it. Educate yourself, and then change.
Me?
So, when we talk about cancel culture, we kind of like to think of it as some mob acting in the Twitter sphere, as it were. But I'd like to remind you of, because it's actually about power. Cancel culture is about power. So if you cast your mind back a couple of years to the Nike and Colin Kaepernick experience, right? Colin was actually having a serious cancel culture movement against him. And this was a professional league that were deciding that they're going to close him out of an environment where he makes money. And also, which is the environment where the reason Nike sponsor him is because he's in that environment. And so when he was canceled, when he lost his contracts, when he wasn't being fielded, what Nike did was they kept backing Colin, because that is the culture of that brand. That is the strategy of that brand, is it backs the sportsman. It backs the everyday sportsman in all of us. And even in the moment when it felt like there's no reason why Nike should carry on sponsoring this person, what Nike did was they were brave and they stuck to their strategy, and they actually invested more in their sponsorship with Colin. And you'll remember the ad that they broke with Colin Kaepernick, which yielded great results, not just in terms of sales, but also just in terms of who the company was and the sentiment around the company, which is what you see then in the earnings of the company, even beyond the sales of the everyday people, but you also see it in the sentiment, because you see it in the value of the company as well. And that's what being brave is about as a marketer. It's about being clear about your strategy. It's about sticking to your strategy no matter what, and you will be rewarded for your bravery.
Fahim, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, it's sort of something that I think is important that we talk to, which is we're talking about cancel culture as sort of this like destination that brands get to or that happen, etc. And I think it's important to have an honest conversation around what is the impact that we think people want when something is cancelled, and when is something cancelled? Because if you look at, if you unpack it, there's a part of cancel culture which is like social activism, which existed before. Now it's got a microphone and a platform and all these wonderful things. And there are other parts that are sort of just a disagreement in points of view, and it's shut down. But I think it's important to kick around, when has something been cancelled? So if something receives enough of a social backlash, is that a good result? Is that sort of what people want? If some people opt out and others still opt in, is that successful cancelling? I'll give you an example. Like R. Kelly was cancelled very clearly on social media. The week of his conviction, his streams went up 500%. So is that cancelled now? Because commercially, it isn't really. It is in terms of people feeling a sort of opting out and some sort of, I suppose, emotional justice, which has its value. But when has something been cancelled? You know, Kanye was cancelled for some strange views on slavery. His album in the same year was #1 on Billboard. So what is the measure that we're using for something to be truly cancelled? And let's unpack that, because I think there's an individual thing where people just opt out, and that's cool. But en masse, when has something actually been cancelled? The world response to Russia is a very good example of actual impact. But on the flip side to that, the people who've lost out most is the average Russian people. So what does success look like? And are we sort of giving into sort of vanity metrics versus real change? Is it really happening? Was my question.
All right, I'm going to cross to Kagiso. Kagiso, we've got a question from the audience, which I'm going to direct your way. Do you think that brands can actually fully recover from supposed cancellation? So once it's happened to them, they've been in the firing line, do you think that they can recover?
Yeah, I think they definitely can. I'm trying to think of an example right now, but I can't, not one comes to mind, and one should. But I think it's something, I don't think, the classic way of doing it, even some personalities do it in terms of, I've done something and I've apologized, or I've kind of, contaminated the water somewhere, and, people now have diseases and I'm going to give those people money. I think it's not that. I think the first thing for brands is always to be able to read the room. Like, you read the room, you know what's happening. And once you find yourself in that space, you would have to do something that is clear in terms of what is it that you stand for as a brand. Because people can cancel you. The same example that Pumi made in terms of Nike, right? Like, there were certain people that canceled Nike because of that. But being clear in terms of, this is what we believe in, this is what we stand for. There'll always be people that share the same beliefs. And also, I think what Fahim is talking about in terms of the impact of cancel culture, there's one part where people are talking about it. It's happening, it's there. But what impact does it have on the cancellation? So if you're about sales, but they cancel the brand, then you are not really affected. So in returning, what needs to happen is there has to be a clear, kind of communication in terms of, this is what we believe, this is what we're about. And once you do the knee-jerk response of apologizing, saying, sorry, an intern did that, then you're not coming back. Coming back is you going back to your truth and say, this is what we're about, and this is what the intention behind this. And I think that's a key word, intention, right? There's intention from the spectator side, and there's intention from the brand side, whether that be a personality or an establishment. If your intention is clear, there's always going to be opinions. There are certain pieces of work that we've seen taken from TV. We used to call it banned, right? Essentially canceled. This ad has been banned. The good example that I have is the South African Nando's xenophobia ad. That was canceled. But every time it keeps coming back, because this is who they are, what they wanted to say was very clear. And that ad keeps coming back. Every time the issue of xenophobia arises in South Africa, people are the same people that were, kind of, or maybe some people that were not for that ad at that time, right? Context. When are now the ones bringing it up again to the surface to say, Nando said it years ago, and here it is, here's the truth. So if you're clear on what you stand for, there's no need to try and go, we need a strategy to come back. You know, it's not about a strategy to come back. It's firstly, you should know what your intention is. And also what I think, you know, you obviously want to hear what the problem is. You know, culture shifts, culture changes. Even though it's cancel culture now, it was something else before. And there are new issues that come, you know, into culture that you were not aware of. Someone, you know, impersonated Chris Rock with blackface. At the time, that was cool because what he was doing was trying to impersonate this other comedian from a comedian perspective. But now we have more knowledge and kind of, you know, we understand what that means. So, you know, are you coming back? Or are you trying to sort of contextualize, you know, why you were doing those things? But if this is who you are, if this is what you stand for, then there's no need to want to come back. And that starts in the beginning. Like Puma was saying, your strategy from the beginning should be, this is what we do, this is what, you know. So you can come back, but with what you believe, not just as an apology.
So brands need to be true to this brand purpose. They need to know what their purpose is from the start, and they need to stick true to it in order to kind of avoid these hurdles. I mean, Kagiso at Grid, you build brands by giving them meaning. That's very important to you. So when you're building these strategies for these brands, how much do you consider cancel culture currently? Is it a term that is quite, you know, prevalent when building these plans, or is it something that you feel like it's already been around, you're already doing the thing, you do it subconsciously?
I mean, I think, you know, I think every creative agency, marketer, we always think about the response, right? In PR agencies, there's always a crisis room where it's a good campaign, but we know something is going to happen somehow. There's always a tactical force that's always waiting to do that. And now it's become more. I think also in South Africa, with a different, I mean, creating work in South Africa is beautiful in terms of the diversity, but now there are even much more layers to consider in terms of the diverse thinking and beliefs that people have. So one of the main things what we do is to clearly define what it is that we stand for, what it is that we're against. Find the true meaning of the brand. And yes, some people might feel like, you know, that's not me, you know, I'm afraid of Twitter, like I think Ashley was talking about, I'm afraid of Black Twitter, what are they going to say? But if you know exactly what it is that you want to communicate, and I think it's always that it's, you have an idea, you are using all these other things to amplify that idea, right? And you are speaking to a particular audience, and so the fear comes from you are thinking about other people that you're not speaking to, right? What will they say? But what are the people that you're talking to? What are they going to say? What are they going to feel? And if you're doing it for a particular reason, you have a clear purpose, then there's no need to kind of fear anything. You have to define your meaning. Absolutely.
Great. For him, looking at all these different layers that Kagiso was speaking of, what is the role of cancel culture in advertising?
So, I mean, the truth is you can't out-campaign bad behavior or questionable values. I think to try and out-advertise that, or to, you know, put a campaign varnish on that would be stupid. So I think it's about an honest reflection around the organization, its values, where it fits in. And then, to Pumi's point, developing strategies, plans, campaigns, and then advertising that reflect that. Now, there are, you know, certain things that brands can do in terms of making sure they have the internal tripwires so that, you know, an individual subconscious bias doesn't end up as a, you know, massive through-the-line campaign. I think there's been enough that's been said around, you know, different people's subconscious bias, and some companies are taking that seriously in terms of training, etc. But I think ultimately what this does is forces us to be a lot more responsible. And that doesn't mean in place of bravery, because I think the danger is that, you know, we all sort of gravitate towards the safest common denominator. That's not a win at all. That's a big loss, I think, because then brands aren't playing the powerful role they can. So I think it's much more a question of internal culture, ensuring there's diversity of thought in the room, and ensuring there's a culture of inclusivity to enable those views to be heard. And then to be clear on who you are. The companies who are clear on who they are not worried about this that I speak to. It's the ones who go, how do we fit into this like cool new world? Well, people, first of all, don't really want you around. Let's start there. And then, we can go from there. Cool.
Pumi, so once you've been cancelled, I mean, there are brands out there that have been cancelled, they've gone through the motions. How do you think these brands, once they've hit rock bottom, can actually achieve trust from their consumers again? What should they be doing? How should they be doing it in order to build that relationship once again?
The thing about brands and branding and the work that we do as marketers or advertisers and designers is we really, and I started today by saying that we are in a position of seducing the audience into buying our brand, into buying our services. And if we move from a position of fear, then you're never going to grow your brand. Nobody wakes up, even as an individual, nobody wakes up in the morning and looks at themselves in the mirror and says, how can I go about my day-to-day without offending a single person? That's not what you do. So why would you make your brand personality be that way, And I think we have many examples throughout the history of branding and advertising of organizations who essentially should never, even to this day, be. I mean, if you think about VW, for instance, how does a brand like VW grow in the United States directly after America came onto their shores to fight the Germans? And yet they made sure that they export their brand. And when all those soldiers got back home, the VW was in the streets and they bought that brand. You know what I'm saying? And that's what seduction is about. That's what the strategy is about. But you cannot move from a position of fear. You cannot move from a position that says, how do I not offend people? How do I make sure that they like me all the time? You have to be likable. You have to be, you have to be recognizable, and you have to be relatable to the audience that you are seeking. And what that means is essentially means that you have got to have the diversity in the room, diversity of thought, diversity of skills, in order to be able to appeal to the audience in a new, fresh, and different way. But you've also got to be brave. You cannot be moving from a position of fear.
Fahim?
Yeah, Pumi reminded me of something, which is if we go along with the way we started this discussion, which is that cancel culture is essentially a new mechanism of sort of boycotting. The biggest boycott in history is joined by, I think, it's about 350 million people, and it grows every day. And that boycott is the installation of ad blockers, and it's the boycott of digital advertising. So that is an example of something that people are raising their hand and canceling on such scale that I think that's something marketers have got to take awareness of, is to go, when people are going so far as to literally wanting to remove your presence from their day, maybe there's a more fundamental question we need to ask around the meaning and the value that we're adding to people, communities, societies, before we sort of walk into a room and have a discussion about how we're going to avoid cancel culture. I think there's more fundamental questions being asked of companies at the moment.
Yeah, 100%. And Pumi, just to add to your question there, why do you think that some of those cancellations are more short-lived than others?
I think I'm a fan of advertising. I'm a scholar of advertising. I've been in this business for so long. And it's one of the things that I do is, like Fahim was talking about, is really there is nothing new under the sun, right? So you see these cycles of things repeating themselves. And if you've looked back, then you're able to kind of look forward and say, this is where there is an opportunity. This is where there's a pothole, avoid that, right? And it's kind of like, I'm always reminded of the Henry Ford quote of, if I'd asked the consumer, they would have said they wanted faster horses, right? Sometimes what your brand is supposed to do is it's supposed to surprise and delight the consumer with something they didn't even know they wanted. And that's where the magic lives, because that's when the audience says, oh, I've never thought about that. You know, David Ogilvy called it a smile in the mind, because what it is you're surprising and delighting the consumer in order to change their behavior to the desired behavior that you want. What you want them to do is to buy your product. That's all you want to do. You just want them to buy your product over any other person's product. And that's why it's a seduction. That's why and you've got to be, you know, if you think about a new boyfriend, right? I see your ring there, you know, glinting in the, and you think about the excitement of being in a new relationship and what it is that keeps you in your relationship. It's all those moments of silence and growing and fun and kind of unexpected things. And that's what brands also have to do. You've got to understand and realize that you are in a relationship with the consumer. And that relationship, you are the person in the relationship that has got to keep the relationship alive. That's what your strategy does. Is it says, how do I keep this relationship alive with my consumer? And how do I not annoy them?
I love that analogy. Kagiso, do you have something to add to what Pumi just said?
Yeah, I mean, you know, this thought of like pleasing everyone, right? Like, I think Pumi was saying, like, you don't wake up and go, I hope everyone likes me today, you know? You know, like, you know, I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and randomly, like after like some like a quiet moment, they sort of just went, huh, I realized that agency doesn't have Chinese people. Huh. Clearly they're not as diverse as I think they are. And this is an agency that has, you know, just about everyone. In fact, there was one Chinese person in the agency. But this person is now deciding, well, that's something to talk about, right? As much as it can be a force for good, and the idea of really taking a stand against, you know, a big personality or brand, there's also the fake accounts that we create, right? So that we can say something about them. So as much as you don't, like, you can do your great work, you know, and your work can come out diverse, can look great, but there is a culture. Oh, we also need to think about how, like, words evolve as well, right? Or even the understanding of that. So the way people my age and younger than I am, the way they understand the word culture, sometimes we're doing it for the culture. But what is this culture that we talk about? Is it a way of being, a new behavior? You know, so culture is, this is just what we do. This is who we are. You know, we call things out, and now we have no purpose because nothing has happened in a very long time. So we need to call something out. That agency has no Chinese people. Let's go call that out, you know? So you are able to kind of see the short-lived cancellations over the cancellations that really, like, you know, this is a big thing. And, you know, that somehow also perpetuates the fear in brands when you do things thinking that, you know, everyone is going to be on the lookout. If you're doing your things right, and what you put out there is what you intend to put out there, and you know that you've done the groundwork, right, in your purpose as well as what's needed out there, there is no need to kind of fear that, because someone will say, why do you have black jelly babies in your, you know, what does that look like? Or, you know, so there's always those kinds of things. And, you know, it's understanding it as, to some people, it's just culture. This is how we do things, you know? So I just wanted to bring that up because there are certain forms, that there are new forms of how, you know, cancel culture behaves in the great scheme of things.
Yeah, it's exactly that saying where cancel culture is more dangerous than what it wants to cancel. So it's always taking that into consideration when starting these movements. But Ashley, I'm going to cross to you. What are some of the effects that you think the spread of this untrustworthy information through social media can have on brands and their reputation?
A lot of negative impact, definitely. I think, you know, the stat is that fake news travels 6 times faster than authentic news. And I think it is kind of with the speed of feed, how fast things move online. Sometimes we are sharing this moral outrage without kind of doing our due diligence. And I think for marketers, it just highlights the importance of social listening, investing in a social listening tool, prioritizing your community management team. I feel like everyone on this call is quite advertising focused. And once your ad goes out, it's your social and community management team that's kind of driving that conversation forward. So I think for marketers, it's really, really important to keep that in mind and understand that kind of crossover between social, PR, and above the line advertising.
Great. We're going to move across now to just... Yes.
The fantastic thing about South Africa is, even though Black Twitter or Twitter has such a loud voice and seems so large in the room, we mustn't forget that we actually have a very small social media penetration, right? Twitter is much smaller than Facebook in South Africa, but even Facebook and Twitter combined is much smaller than what we have out in the market, right? With 60 million odd South Africans, we probably only have about 5 million that are sitting on social media. So there is still an opportunity to have a conversation with a large part of our audience that is a persuasive conversation without the, kind of always having the fear looming large of what social media, what misinformation is sitting on social media. And again, it's also about the brand experience, right? So there might be people talking badly about your brand on social media, but if people have a brand experience in real life that does not match up to what is on social media, you're much more likely to have a good brand presence in the world than there is like the loud noise that's happening on Twitter.
Him?
I was going to say, to echo what Pumi's saying, when we say something's been cancelled, by definition, it's no longer happening. It doesn't exist. It's been cancelled, like an event has been cancelled. But I think it's more about like postponement culture, if you ask me, because when I walk into Clicks, the certain shampoo brands pretty well stacked and selling pretty well. A certain clothing brand that put out some questioning t-shirts seems to be doing pretty well. So I think it's a bit of a misnomer when we go cancel culture, because I can't think of a brand in South Africa that has been cancelled online that no longer exists in reality, that isn't still in people's baskets. So therefore, what was cancelled? Is it about a perception of that brand in a moment of time? Cool, that needs to be managed, responded to, etc. But the word cancellation in and of itself, I think, is misleading, because I can't think of a brand in South Africa that no longer exists. Maybe there's one, but I can't think of one.
I think that was your point earlier as well of, what is the intention of cancel culture? I don't think it's to say we never want to see this shampoo brand again. We just want them to be accountable and to again, for us to feel vindicated, for you to know that this is not the behavior that we've come to expect from brands. It's not what we want the brands we use to stand for.
And Ashley, do you think that the audience on social media can easily distinguish between if someone is just out there bullying a brand or if someone is actually there out to cancel them due to a specific, due to something specific?
Definitely. Like I had said earlier, I think consumers and the online community, we're a lot more informed, we're a lot more aware. We are kind of looking at whether or not this is a real complaint. We're kind of doing that work. And I think we are a little less ready to jump on board when somebody just kind of complains about something. We're interrogating it a little bit more, which is the shift that I'm excited to see, that there's a little bit more discourse. Often Twitter, also with its character limitations, it doesn't give us a lot of a chance or a platform to really unpack things. But I guess that's why there's also Twitter spaces now, so we can really talk.
Great. So I'm going to move to final thoughts to start landing this discussion. So what I'm going to do is just go around, chat to everyone about what their top things are that they think that marketers or brands should consider to avoid being cancelled. So it's your words of advice. We've obviously got quite a few marketing professionals in the audience. People want to know what they need to look out for. So yeah, what are your top things that you think that they should look out for? And I'm going to start with Kagiso.
Thanks, Janine. I think it's been said quite a few times, but the important thing for me, and Nike will be a great example here with that, Colin Kaepernick piece. Clearly define what you stand for, and you don't have to be part of the hype. As much as people say, if you are not saying anything, you might as well, kind of be, part of the opposition. If you are clear in what your purpose is, what you stand for, what you want to be known for, what your intentions are, you will not find yourself in rooms that you shouldn't be in. You won't be commenting on things that you're not supposed to be commenting on. And when people know what you stand for and whatever you do, they will know exactly the intention behind it because it's something that you built, that you believe in. So know what you believe in, clearly define it. Forget about the hype. Trends come and go. There were big movements that came through and a lot of brands were asking themselves, should we say something, should we not? If you've never been a person who says something, this is not your time. Learn to read the room. So define your purpose, stand by it, let it be known. That's my word.
Great. Ashley.
I think, well, one of the things I think we didn't really talk about is we're speaking a lot about advertising, but even for brands, you can have an individual on your team, you can have the CEO or whoever it might be, that could also be cancelled and that still affects the brand, and then it falls on us as the marketing team to kind of help out. So I think even if you're towing the line, even if you're trying to be diverse, you're checking all the boxes, a crisis can happen anywhere, anytime. And I think the thing that I would like to leave is just the importance of social media. Maybe you think that your brand shouldn't be there. Maybe you think you're not interested in listening to half the population on Twitter. I still think that it's important to invest in online reputation management, social listening. People are talking about your brand, whether you like it or not. And I think it's better if you are actually listening.
Phumi.
So I'm going to hit you with another David Ogilvy quote. The customer is not a moron. She is your wife, right? So understand that it's not about you as the marketer or as the brand. It really is about your consumer, your customer, and it's about making them feel good, feel special, and be seduced by your product and services. I think Fahim talked a little bit earlier about the metrics that we use to see what success looks like. And I think as marketers, we've fallen into a rut where we use metrics that comfort us much more than tell us the truth, right? Or we are using metrics that say somebody else in another, this is how they did it. We're still in a seduction with the customer. She's not a moron.
Fahim, bring us home.
The only thing I have to add is my favorite quote from Socrates, who said, "Don't be cuck, be lekker."
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. It's been a very insightful morning with a lot of food for thought. It's reminding brands to stop, look, and question what they are doing and also why they are doing it. If you missed any of this, it will be on demand on the Red Zone platforms. Thanks again to our panelists today, Fahim Chaudhry, Partner and Managing Director at M&C Saatchi Abel, Ashley Burton, Digital Associate at Consulum, Phumi Mashego, Founding Partner at Ignitive, and Kagiso Tsepe, the Executive Creative Director from Grid worldwide. We will see you all again soon for our next Financial Mail Red Zone online event. Thank you. Have a great day.